So a little about me, it's up on the slide. I've been doing this for about 25 years. I work at CrowdStrike as a principal consultant, as I just said. There's a line in there that says a little bit of everything else. I've done quite a lot in 25 years. What I'm going to be talking about today actually comes from a lot of that experience. Most recently, I've been at CrowdStrike for 5 years, working in their incident response team and with the rest of their services team, the proactive services team. We divide things up into reactive and proactive at CrowdStrike for a reason. It's really simple. The reactive is incident response. That's fighting the fire. Proactive is planning for the fire, preventing the fire, all the other stuff. And the thing about preventing fires is it's tricky. The thing about being proactive is it's a terrible word. I hate the word proactive. But there's a lot of ways you can do it. And the list here, we're going to be concentrating on the stuff in the red category of this, because the rest of this list is basically stuff that's going to bring everybody from the company in. It's assessments, it's program development, it's policy writing, it's all the really unsexy security stuff. But then there's that other side in red, which is red teaming, pen testing, quality assurance, vulnerability scanning, and a list of things that probably a lot of you have done in the past or still do right now. The thing with this is that I spend a lot of time doing assessments and tabletop exercises and purple teaming, right? And the first thing I'll ask people is, why are you testing this? And there's reasons for this, because usually the things I get out of people when I come into these places are like, oh yeah, you know, this is missing, this. So you already know, right? Why are you testing it? And the interesting thing about that is I'll always get 3 responses. 2 of them are great, one's kind of terrible. I want to know that it works. I want to know how to improve it. The third one is because someone told me to. Now, don't get me wrong, audit-driven testing is a great idea. Regulatory-driven testing is a great idea, but PCI gave us a bar for the internet. You must be this high to ride the internet. We need to be somewhere up here. I mean, the folks talking about AI earlier were kind of pointing this out. Like, we've gone a lot further than just kind of saying, okay, these base tests, this unit testing that we're doing is fine. So the why question kind of gets into a broader thing. I don't think there's anyone in this room who does security who wants to be bad at it, and that would be part of it as well. There's an emotional involvement. The next question is how. I'm going to be a little cheeky about this. The answer is usually infrequently, once in a while. We do red teams, sometimes we do purple teams. I've seen a lot of really good purple teaming recently. The reason I ask how, though, is because I want to know about budget. And this is kind of what the problem is with a lot of the testing that we're approaching. Testing occurs on a spectrum. On the one side, and I apologize for oversimplifying this if this is what you do already, the gentleman with the raised eyebrows over there, I can kind of already see. Testing occurs on a spectrum. You got 2 buckets. You've got tabletop exercises and red teams. There's a bunch of stuff in the middle. There's QA, there's vulnerability scanning. But effectively, when we're talking about getting everyone around a table to do something, there are only 2 kinds of ways we're going to do it. 1, we send a bunch of people in to mash things up and test things. Or 2, we get everyone around a table, we get them talking, and they basically play security Dungeons and Dragons. Both of these things work really well for what they're for. We can put them on a timeline, though. And this is where things get interesting. Tabletop exercises are kind of low energy, right? You get a bunch of people in the room. It takes a lot of effort to build that out. It takes a lot of planning, and it takes a lot of time on the part of a few people. Get everybody in, and hopefully they all participate. Hopefully they're not kind of just sleeping through it or checking their email while you're talking. Red teaming, on the other hand, very intensive in a lot of cases. It takes a lot of effort, and it's usually short duration. One of the problems with red team, actually, red teams in general and pen testing is, you don't have the same kind of time an attacker would. So the other problem with this, from where I sit, and I apologize for kind of just giving you my opinion here, but that's what I'm going to do, is that we're only covering parts of the incident timeline. We're not covering all of it. We're not covering the processes, the escalation pieces, the parts where people have to actually make a phone call to a CISO at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And the issue with this is that when you've got a red team doing this and you've got to make that phone call, it kind of stops there. You don't have to do the containment, the eradication, the recovery, all those other parts. You're kind of like, okay, it was the red team, that's fine. Working where I do, I've seen a fair amount of this happen where, red team shows up, they do a bunch of good stuff, there's a good report written, and we don't really see what happens on the SOC side or on the defender side. What do they have to do to get there? I think the thing with this spectrum is that it's kind of interesting. You can size this any way you want, but there's a middle part, and this is what the combined testing point is. So I apologize for getting to the point in the middle of the slideshow, not at the beginning, but there's a reason for this. We don't do a lot of combined testing. I've only really seen advanced security programs do purple teaming on a regular basis. Most people do it as an adventure. It's kind of exciting. Sort of like when you're doing a fire drill, and this is, again, maybe the reasoning behind this. fire drills are not just about getting people out of a building quickly. Yes, that's the most important part, but there's a lot that has to go into that in terms of the planning and the preparation for it. And if you've got a volunteer fire department in your building, if you've got people who are doing emergency management in your building, they'll tell you there's more going on there than just the fire drill. There's a lot. There's training, there's practice, there's the process. So that middle part's kind of the thing that I think is important. And if I can say anything right now, it's that more purple teaming means you're going to learn more as defenders. It means you're going to learn more about your vulnerabilities and your response processes. And it means you're also going to learn more about the company you work with. Because if you're doing it right, you're actually getting everyone else involved. I've got 2 good points for this up there. There are a dozen more. I'm sure you can all think of one right now. I encourage you to do so. Don't shout them all out at once. Okay, don't shout at all. But the crux of this is that you're trying to improve security. You want people to know how things are working. So do it. It's a drill and a test. Part of the goal behind purple teaming and combined testing, and I'm not calling it purple teaming because you can call it a live fire if you want. You can call it whatever you want, honestly. People have different names. At CrowdStrike, we actually use the RTBT internally, red team, blue team, because we've got both teams. The problem with this is that the blue team includes the CISO. The blue team includes human resources and legal in some cases. The blue team includes people who are going to make a phone call and actually escalate because we actually want to test that. And this is kind of the thing with the drill part. Getting people out of the building, helpful. Understanding why the fire is forming and training your firefighters, more helpful. If you can do both at once, that can be kind of great, especially when it's not dangerous. You need 4 things for this, really simply. I'm not giving you a formula here, obviously. I mean, I work in consulting services, so we like keeping some of that sauce to ourselves, but this is mostly open source. So I'm borrowing from a couple of places. The first one's going to be just participation at all levels. You want executive sponsors. You want people actually buying into this. You can't start this type of a program without actually having backing. It's a heavy lift. And unlike something like pen testing or audit or assessment, there's not as much of a regulatory driver for it because it's a little more advanced than some of the stuff you'd be doing. The thing that I've seen that's been interesting with some of our clients, though, is that the really crafty auditors, and yes, I just said that, will show up and go, okay, I think we can check off 3 boxes with this. We've got the training, we've got the testing, and we've got this third thing, this TTX thing. We can kind of fold them all together. That could be kind of cool. And sometimes that works out. The second part, a plan that includes timing. That ties in with the first part. If you're getting your execs involved, you're getting people who actually have schedules who don't want to necessarily be sitting on a bridge call for 8 hours, or 12, or 16, or those of you who have dealt with an incident over the weekend, you know what I'm talking about. Well, we don't have to do that here. It would be good to remind them that that's something that happens, but at the same time, you can actually schedule this. You're doing something that's a test. It's not an emergency. You can plan around. You can set things up in stages. The nice thing about that is that it's a lot easier to get buy-in from somebody who's got a schedule that's blocked out until next January when you say, I only need 2 hours of your time on Tuesday and another 2 hours on Thursday. We know this is going to happen on a schedule because we're not playing with the sort of volatility of an actual incident. The last 2 pieces are kind of stuck together, clear targets and goals. I've done a fair amount of work with red teaming teams in my life. I've done a little bit of it myself. I've done a fair amount of a lot of things. The one thing I keep hearing, and I hear this on the incident response side too, is we want to prove a negative. We want to prove that something happens, but we're not really sure what. What I wrote up there, we want to prove a threat actor can't get in. I'm sorry, you're not going to. I've actually had a lot of we want to prove that we want to prove that you can't exfiltrate data from our network. Again, you got to set your goals correctly here. If somebody who's actually good at this wants to exfiltrate data, they will. I mean, I've got a USB key with a presentation on it. That's already a start. I had an instructor years ago who used to carry around what looked like a Bible in his pocket. It was a removable media. Like, this is not a good goal. Set it down a little. Look at your monitoring. Look at your tactics. Look at how people work. So instead of saying, we want to prove that we're so good, why don't we check how we're doing and see what we can find the first time around? And that comes to the last piece, the repeatable structure. Do it more than once. The reason you're going to want to do it more than once is because if you've actually set these goals correctly, you're basically doing science now. It's no longer responding to an incident, so you can actually look at how things are going. This is like a coaching program, or for that matter, training a firefighting team. Obviously, you're also going to want to look at outcomes. I like the color red, so just stick to the red category on this one. But I've listed some of the other outcomes from a lot of the other testing that I've done in the past or the work that I've done in the last 10 years doing consulting. There's a crossover here. Combined exercises we're offering going to get you a lot. The goal setting process is actually going to give you a good idea of what your outcomes look like. You should probably be working with your execs to figure that out together. And whatever red teams you're bringing in. One of the things on here that's actually kind of interesting in the middle, process improvements and communication gaps. We don't always see this with purple teams because a lot of times purple teams follow a structure of kind of an assumed breach or a wooden click, where basically you've got somebody who's already in the environment. They're going to do bad stuff. But then we hit that point where the red team just kind of goes, well, we can't go any further. We've captured the flag. We're going to stop. Well, this is when you get the SOC team and the incident responders in. I had a client, I think 5-6 years ago at this point. He was an amateur actor. So he would actually call up and impersonate people. He would do all sorts of extra stuff to add to the social engineering factor. This is what I'm talking about. So you're stepping beyond a very structured purple team approach and saying, okay, let's include social engineering. Let's even maybe get the CISO in on it and tell them we're doing this, but not tell them what's happening, so that when we escalate, they actually don't really know what's going on and we can see how they respond. That's kind of the point behind this. You can go so much further with this type of testing if you've got buy-in and you've actually planned it correctly. And the last part, of course, is that you're going to want to report, so that way you can kind of sell it to everybody for the next time and get more people into the party. And that's kind of my point. Get everyone in the adventure. People look at cybersecurity like it's something that's hard, and it is. But it doesn't need to be hard and esoteric and obscure. We don't have to gatekeep. You can bring your human resources folks on board for what they need to be on board. You can bring your legal on board. We do that all the time. And what I've seen with that is that IT stakeholders is actually a much broader group of people at this point. Security stakeholders are an even broader group of people. Bringing them in and getting them to talk to one another will give your defense team a much better idea of how everything's supposed to work. And that's basically it. So this was shorter than 15 minutes. Thank you all for sitting up at the front. I'll be over in the corner if you have any questions.